Just as we think of the last one, last point I made, right? We're going to the Scripture for everything, okay? It teaches something about everything, every application to our life. This is what happens if you don't do that. Okay? This is what happens if you neglect that. You find a different source for truth. And this happens very much today. Churches, leaders, congregations that reduce the importance of the Bible and what it teaches, that start a progressive drift from the truth. And let me highlight that for a moment, because it's never automatic. I guarantee for the sect like the Sadducees, it wasn't, we're just going to deny the resurrection. It started incrementally, eroding away the truth, piece at a time, a little bit here and a little bit there. Right? You pull away this doctrine, then you pull away the other one, and eventually you find yourself with no assertion of doctrine at all. This is what happened with these men, and this is what's happening today. An incremental erosion of biblical authority for whose? Our own, instead of God's. Eventually you find yourself with no biblical basis to what you believe at all. Let me use a controversial example of this. One major example, I believe, is how many churches have female pastors. I believe that this is a sign of, in essence, a very similar principle of what took root in the Sadducees and is massively agreed upon in the negative sense in churches today. I'd say probably the majority of churches, even in our own city, would agree with a woman taking the office of a pastor. And many of the arguments for this, at least in a personal sense, are, well, she has gifts, right? Why should she be excluded? She's good at preaching. She knows the Bible better. She feels that the Lord has really tasked her in this way to preach and be a pastor in the church. Why should the office be reserved strictly for men? Isn't that sexist? You see, this begins the process of chipping and chipping and chipping and chipping away at the truth. And what I've often heard now as we get into more of the biblical response or argument, much like the Sadducees, not just a personal argument on this topic, but sort of a molding and manipulating of the text. Well, when Paul says that he doesn't permit a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man in 1 Timothy, he's really only just speaking to that historical context. Right? It was different then. Women were very mistreated. And so this is going, over and above. And so this would be helpful for the church in that time. But we're in a modern context, so it doesn't really apply anymore. Really? Because even as you consider that same text in the context, if you keep reading, what does Paul found that command on? Creation, the garden. He said, based upon Eve, her constitution, her sin. This is the fundamental reality of who we are as men and women. She is not to have this office on that basis. And upon the basis of creation, a fundamental truth that is not contextual to one generation, we obviously must affirm that women cannot have this office. But I say this kind of hermeneutic, and hermeneutic is just another word, fancy word for the science of interpreting Scripture. It will never stop here. It never, ever does. You take one truth away, you've taken it all. Pretty soon, the same basis that you appeal to conform Scripture to your own ideas is the basis you're going to refer to later on down the road when another controversial issue comes around. And why is it, as I consider that many of the churches that allow for women pastors are the same ones who are now flirting with the presence and affirmation of homosexuality in their church? It just follows along the progress, deeper and deeper and deeper into what they will accept. We need to be deeply aware of this, of those who are not being fixed on truth anymore, but have lost themselves in error.